It will not come as news to anyone in the judicial system that a plague of justice has fallen over the land. Suing is rapidly becoming America's favorite indoor sport, and the result is a court system that has become, in some cases, hopelessly clogged with important and frivolous lawsuits all mixed up together that under our democracy get the same thoughtful and serious consideration. So pervasive is this plague of justice that it may be leading to a major injustice: the denial of speedy resolution, denial of access to a court to redress a serious wrong. The good news about our legal system is that, in theory, everyone has access to it. But has that access led to too much of a good thing? Here's an example. On the evening of August 28, 1974, a mildly successful Portland accountant named James Turel was returning to his bookkeeping business. As he entered the premises, he was attacked, severely beaten, and strangled to death. The murder was discovered the next morning. County police started an investigation. After several months, the clues led to Mr. Turel's business associate, a CPA named Addicks. He was arrested and charged with the crime. And after a 2-week jury trial, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. That verdict was upheld 2 years later by the State Court of Appeals and then again by the State Supreme Court. There was no doubt in anyone's mind then, nor is there now, that Addicks is guilty of murder. Addicks has virtually exhausted the system, has used up all the legal processes that justice provides, and now resides here in the state penitentiary in Salem, Oregon. He's no longer a practicing accountant. He's become a full-time jailhouse lawyer, a writ writer extraordinaire. Addicks does not deny his guilt, but he has managed, through long study in the prison library, to cloud the issue of his conviction to a degree that many a practicing lawyer would be proud of. And he showers the courts with the fruit of his labor. How much money have you sued for over the years, the total sum?
I'm not trying to to back off or to lessen the impact or anything like that, but I just honestly don't know. It's in the millions. It's in the several millions, 10 or 15 million, maybe more. You know, I don't know.
But public officials know because they're spending taxpayers' money to defend themselves in suits brought by Addicks against the county commission, because it's responsible for the sheriff's department and the county district attorney's office that successfully prosecuted, and Harl Hawes, the then district attorney.
When you're named and you're sued for $1 million, you, even though you know there's nothing to it, you do pay attention to it. You have to locate counsel, you have to have the interviews with the attorney that's representing you, and then the cost to the state of Oregon with the Attorney General's office involved in providing a defense, the court time, the judge's time. That's all taxpayer money.
Scott McAllister is an assistant attorney general for the state of Oregon. His job is defending public officials in suits brought by prisoners. The handiwork of Addicks is familiar to him. And how much can it cost the state to defend itself? For example, in one lawsuit brought by Addicks.
The attorney who represented him was paid by the county. That attorney probably got in the neighborhood of $12,000. Then there was court time, judge time, over $15,000, probably $20,000. Other things that weren't added into that because they're not really an out-of-pocket expense. So I guess $50,000 or more on one frivolous lawsuit.
That $50,000 represents what it cost the state in just one of Addicks' suits. This is just a part of the paperwork that just one private citizen who's been caught in Addicks' legal web has had to prepare in order to defend himself. That citizen is Stanley Turel, the son of the man Addicks murdered.
When my father was murdered, the responsibility of operating the business fell into my hands. And in the process of investigating him, I let him work here for 4 months. And I ended up coming up with evidence that I turned over to the police. And he's suing me. He claims I was a police agent in disguise. He claims that I should have acquired a subpoena in order for me to remove records out of this office and give it to the police, even though my family owns the business, owns the building.
Don't you think it's an outrage, for example, for you to sue the son of the victim of the murder?
Not under the circumstances of what I believe the son did. Even in my personal briefcase, that had nothing to do with family business.
What was found in the briefcase, shall we say, or the files in his father's business, became evidence that convicted you of the murder of his father, correct?
Without the data that they got out of the files, and yes, that's correct. Without the files, there would be no conviction.
And a judge in his wisdom somewhere thought that was a legitimate case for him to bring?
It's up to me as the defendant in that particular circumstance to go prove that the case has no merit. So I spent $7,000 on that first case, proving that Addicks' case was ridiculous. The judge agreed, and they threw it out. Then he appeals, and now he's suing us again, even though the local courts have thrown it out.
What does all this cost you in time and money and whatever?
And mental hassle. But the money I've spent, I'm approaching $15,000 in total legal fees as a private citizen defending myself in these lawsuits.
$15,000?
$15,000.
Addicks has been encouraged in his litigiousness by actually winning one suit. He was awarded $5,000 from the county jail for a civil rights violation, but that suit did not affect his murder conviction. Why do you file these suits? Is it a hobby?
No, it's not.
You're a troublemaker.
Some people will say that to some degree.
Well, what would happen if you just said, the hell with it? I'm not going to defend myself. I'm not going to spend another $10,000 or whatever it is in legal fees. I'm just going to ignore these things.
That's exactly what I wanted to do. My attorney advised me that if I didn't answer and fight these ridiculous lawsuits, that I would lose by default. So he sued me for $10 million now, okay? If I didn't answer and fight him, he would win the case by default if I didn't show up to fight him.
How can a man like Addicks, like Rod Addicks, sue the son of the man that he, Addicks, admitted killing for slandering and libeling his good name?
It's hard to believe, but that's the state of affairs that the courts are in right now. Normally, what he could have done was brought a suit against Mr. Addicks for abuse of process or something along that line, filing a purely frivolous lawsuit. But it doesn't work against prison inmates because they have no money anyway. So why get a judgment against somebody who has no funds?
There are about 8,000 prisoner lawsuits against the state in Scott McAllister's office. Some of them quite reasonable, but many, perhaps most of them, frivolous, and more than a few bordering on the absurd.
We usually have, at any given time, 600 or 700 active files open.
So you're going to have work right through the year 2000?
If the inmates would quit filing suit today, I expect that I'd run out of work in about 2 years. It's job security.
The vehicle used by most of these lawyers to get their cases into federal court is Section 1983 of a civil rights law passed over 100 years ago and designed to protect newly freed slaves. Prisoners recently discovered that the broad language of that statute gave them a license to sue for just about everything.
If an officer steps on somebody's foot, an inmate's foot accidentally, well, instead of just filing a grievance, they would rather file 1983 to the federal courts.
Why?
To harass the officer. That's all it's for.
Joe Paveglio, convict, seasoned writ writer, and Albert Tucker, much the same.
You have basically one line of thinking in here, and that's get the pig. That's what it amounts to. And that's expected of you. You're a good convict if you do that.
An idea of what a popular sport, getting the pig, has become. Using that civil rights law alone, in 1971, there were 3,000 prisoner writs. In 1980, there were 13,000. One reason for that increase is that back 5 or 6 years ago, the courts ruled that prisons must provide law libraries. In fact, we know of one prisoner's suit that alleges that the law library in this prison is not sufficiently well stocked. If you or I want to sue, it can cost money, filing fees and other court costs. Prisoners can usually do it for nothing. As for jailhouse lawyers confined to solitary, they still have the use of the law library. Prison guards shuttled their requests to them. After all, deprivation of law books could be grounds for a suit.
21-600-601. That's Ethan Lambert.
In general, the legal system looks kindly on the law as it is practiced in prison. Do the same rather lenient rules apply to people who aren't in jail if they want to sue?
No, and that's one of the ironies. If the person is on the outside, the court decisions have not given them the same kind of benefits that prisoners enjoy. The prisoner is entitled to, in essence, every break. He's not held to any formal rules of pleading, and any mistake he makes basically will be forgiven.
You don't need to prove anything when you file it. That's what you do in court. You can write down anything. I can write down that you slugged me in the mouth, run down and file a suit, and you have to prove you didn't.
Outside of prison walls, legal advice does not come cheap. It does not come cheap inside either. Convicts who learn the law, they call themselves legal clerks, sell their services to less learned colleagues.
The legal clerks that they have here are generating a business for themselves. They charge to do this work.
Do they make pretty good money upstairs?
Well, yeah, it's a business.
How much? Did you ever do that, Joe?
I have done some of it, I'll be truthful.
The charge for one of these lawsuits is based on how complex it is to write up, and payment is usually made in cartons of cigarettes or cash, which is handled by relatives on the outside.
It can go anywhere up. They have an Indian up there that they've milked for over $2,000 now. And he has nothing out of it. Either cash, drugs, or commissary. That's your due process in here.
There are obviously legitimate prisoner lawsuits, but they're not helped by the enormous weight of frivolous paper that's pushed through the system by people like this man. Meet Harry Franklin, serving 11 years for burglary and assault. A prison version of Melvin Belli, Edward Bennett Williams, and the March Hare all rolled into one. And his only client, Harry Franklin. How many lawsuits have you got going?
In this U.S. District Court alone, I believe there's around 95 now.
95?
Yeah. Plus I have some in circuit court.
You got better than 100 cases going.
Yeah.
But are you really serious about a suit, for example, in which you allege that a guard used foul language?
Yeah. I've never taken so much cussing in my life.
How about the suit where you allege the handcuffs were tight?
Yeah, in that case, they had real tight chains. My hands was up this way all the time. I couldn't get any release on them.
Are you suing the judge, the prosecutor, the whole jury,
Yeah, I sued the judge.
and your own lawyer?
Yes.
For putting you in here?
Yes.
What's that?
I sued the court, which includes the judge, for $450 million. And then
Is that all?
Yeah.
Isn't this whole thing really just a gag?
No, it's not a big gag at all. I mean business. I naturally won't get what I sue for, but I just letting them know I stand tall when it comes to fighting for my rights. I see nothing wrong in that.
What I don't understand is when you look at some of Franklin's suits, how does that even last a moment on anyone's desk?
The judge apparently is not entitled to look at those facts and say this is stupid and dismiss it.
So you've got to take some form of action each time?
Every time. If it's served, we've got to defend it.
Listen, let me just read to you what one of the judges said about what you've been doing here.
All right.
Mr. Franklin may have nothing better to do than to pepper this court with frivolous claims and paperwork. This court, however, has better things to do than to canvass all of his complaints. What do you say to the judge?
Well, that was when he canceled out 33 cases of mine, and I sent him to appeal down in Ninth Circuit Court in San Francisco, and I won 11 of those.
When Harry Franklin says he won, he means he was allowed to be heard in court. The right to take up court time, judge time, and lawyer time.
After I won 11, now I'm appealing the other 22 that they wouldn't give me. And they're right now in the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington, D.C.
You figure you beat them?
Sure, I'm going to beat them.
You know, all these lawsuits are costing the taxpayers a whole lot of money.
Me being in here is costing them a lot more money. Or a lot of money, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't ask to come here. When the taxpayers want to fight with me to clean up my record and get me back out of there, well, I'll just quit all this other stuff, too. They're the ones that's clogging the courts. I'm just helping them.
One more of Harry Franklin's suits we neglected to mention. It's all about these railway tracks. Harry is suing for his right to public peace, as he calls it. He claims that the train using this track gives a long blow of its whistle and it disturbs his sleep and or his naps.
It happens usually around 4, 4:15, 4:30. Yesterday it was at 3:30.
In the afternoon?
Yeah.
It only lasts about 10 seconds.
No, I caught it one time for 30 seconds. No reason for it. They don't have to harass us like that.
He's suing for $100 million because of this harassment, and the courts, with all seriousness, will have to consider it. And who knows, the railway may be ordered to be silent.
The word bias doesn't do justice to your story. As an attorney who counsels inmates, I was appalled. Followed by this from another attorney. Many citizens, rich and poor alike, also abuse the justice system. But men abused in prison have nowhere else to turn except to the very system that put them behind bars. Another viewer wrote, watching those jailhouse lawyers, I became so enraged I threw my lighter at the TV. I now intend to sue them for replacement of men.
Nor is there now that Rod Addicks is guilty of murder. Rod Addicks has virtually exhausted the system, has used up all the legal processes that justice provides, and now resides here in the state penitentiary in Salem, Oregon. He's no longer a practicing accountant. He's become a full-time jailhouse lawyer, a writ writer extraordinaire. Addicks does not deny his guilt, but he has managed, through long study in the prison library, to cloud the issue of his conviction to a degree of serious consideration. So pervasive is this plague of justice that it may be leading to a major injustice: the denial of speedy resolution, denial of access to a court to redress a serious wrong. The good news about our legal system is that, in theory, everyone has access to it. But has that access led to too much of a good thing? Here's an example. On the evening of August 28, 1974, a mildly successful Portland accountant named James Turel was returning to his bookkeeping business. As he entered the premise that many a practicing lawyer would be proud of, and he showers the courts with the fruit of his labor. How much money have you sued for over the years, the total sum?
I'm not trying to to back off or to lessen the impact or anything like that, but I just honestly don't know. It's in the millions. It's in the several millions, 10 or 15 million, maybe more. You know, I don't know.
But public officials know because he was attacked, severely beaten, and strangled to death. The murder was discovered the next morning. County police started an investigation. After several months, the clues led to Mr. Turel's business associate, a CPA named Rod Addicks. He was arrested and charged with the crime. And after a 2-week jury trial, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. That verdict was upheld 2 years later by the State Court of Appeals and then again by the State Supreme Court. There was no doubt in anyone's mind then it will not come as news to anyone in the judicial system that a plague of justice has fallen over the land. Suing is rapidly becoming America's favorite indoor sport, and the result is a court system that has become, in some cases, hopelessly clogged with important and frivolous lawsuits all mixed up together that under our democracy get the same thoughtful and